Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that exactly 1 week ago, Donald Trump praised Canada's trade deal with China, calling it a good thing, and saying Mark Carney was doing what he should be doing, and this morning, that same Donald Trump threatened to impose 100% tariffs on all Canadian goods if we don't cancel that deal? And what if I told you that this spectacular public reversal doesn't represent American strength, but rather the desperate flailing of a bully who just realized he's lost control? Just hours ago, Trump posted on Truth Social that if Canada proceeds with our China trade agreement, we will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. He called Prime Minister Mark Carney Governor Carney, a deliberate insult suggesting Canada is merely a subordinate province rather than a sovereign nation. He claimed Canada would become a drop-off port for Chinese goods trying to sneak into American markets. He warned that China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. This is extraordinary. This is unprecedented. And this is, ironically, the single strongest proof that Canada's strategic pivot toward China was not just justified, it was essential. Because here's what Trump's threat actually reveals: panic. The United States just watched Canada assert independence, watched us secure alternatives to American markets, watched us refuse to remain captive to Washington's demands. And Trump's response isn't confident power, it's desperate threats from a position of weakness, wrapped in the language of strength. The headline breaking across global media right now is Trump threatens Canada with 100% tariffs over China deal. But the real story is what that threat exposes about American desperation, about Canadian leverage, and about why everything Mark Carney did in Beijing was strategically brilliant. Today, we need to understand why Trump reversed his position so dramatically, why this threat is almost certainly a bluff that cannot be executed, how this actually strengthens Canada's negotiating position, and most importantly, why this moment proves that Canadian sovereignty and strategic autonomy are not just aspirations, they're necessities for survival. Before we examine why Trump's threat is the best thing that could have happened for Canada, if you value analysis that cuts through panic to reveal strategic reality, please subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you truth when it matters most. Let's start with the timeline, because the whiplash-inducing contradiction tells us everything about what's actually happening inside the Trump administration. January 16th, last Friday. Trump is asked by reporters at the White House about Canada's newly announced trade deal with China. His response? That's okay. That's what he should be doing. It's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that. That wasn't a casual comment. That was Trump on camera, explicitly endorsing Canada's China strategy. He said Carney was doing what he should be doing. He called it a good thing. This was public approval from the President of the United States for Canada's independent trade policy. January 24th this morning, Trump posts on Truth Social that if Canada makes a deal with China, a deal that is already signed, already implemented, already operational, we will face immediate 100% tariffs on all goods entering the United States. 7 days. That's how long it took Trump to go from public endorsement to economic threat. 7 days from good thing to 100% tariffs. 7 days from approval to punishment. What changed? What happened between last Friday and this Saturday that caused this spectacular reversal? The answer is Mark Carney spoke truth to power, and Trump cannot tolerate that. On Wednesday, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Carney delivered an address that sent shockwaves through the global diplomatic community. He didn't attack Trump by name. He didn't engage in personal insults. He simply described reality with crystal clarity. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition, Carney said. He urged the world's middle powers, countries like Canada, Australia, South Korea, the European nations, to deepen cooperation in the face of economic coercion and threats. He made clear that smaller nations cannot simply accept bullying from larger powers, that sovereignty matters, that independence is not negotiable. Trump's response was immediate and revealing. He said, and I quote, "Canada lives because of the United States." Remember that, Mark? The next time you make your statements. Let that sink in. The President of the United States just told Canada, his Prime Minister, that our country only exists because of American permission, that we live because of the United States, that we should remember our subordinate position before we speak. This isn't diplomacy. This isn't alliance management. This is a colonial mindset applied to a G7 democracy, a founding NATO member, and America's largest trading partner. Trump then withdrew Canada's invitation to join his so-called Board of Peace, whatever that is, as punishment for Carney's Davos speech. And now this morning comes the tariff threat, 100% on all Canadian goods if we don't cancel our China deal and accept American dominance. The sequence reveals everything. Trump praised the China deal when he thought it was irrelevant, when he believed it didn't challenge American control. But the moment Carney made clear that Canada will chart its own course, will make its own decisions, will not simply accept American coercion, Trump panicked. And panic manifests as threats. Now, let's talk about why Trump's 100% tariff threat is, in all likelihood, completely unenforceable and represents a bluff that Canada should call rather than fold to. First, the economics are impossible. The United States imports approximately $400 billion worth of goods from Canada annually. That includes 60% of American crude oil imports, 85% of American electricity imports, and massive quantities of steel, aluminum, uranium, natural gas, lumber, and automotive products. If Trump imposes 100% tariffs on Canadian goods, here's what happens. American gas prices double overnight. American electricity grids, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, face immediate shortages and blackouts. American factories that depend on Canadian steel and aluminum shut down. American construction projects halt due to lumber shortages. The American automotive industry, which relies on integrated Canada-US supply chains, collapses within weeks. This isn't speculation. This is basic supply chain reality. The American and Canadian economies are integrated at a level that makes unilateral tariffs economically suicidal for both countries, but particularly for the United States, which depends on Canadian resources to function. Canada is the top export destination for 36 American states. 36 states where American jobs, American businesses, and American workers depend on trade with Canada. Those are states with senators, with representatives, with governors who will scream at Trump the moment their economies start suffering. Second, legal constraints matter. The Canada-US-Mexico agreement, which Trump himself negotiated and signed during his first term, provides tariff-free access for most Canadian goods. Trump cannot simply ignore a treaty he personally championed without going through complex legal processes that would take months or years and face certain court challenges. Yes, Trump has used national security provisions to impose some targeted tariffs on specific goods like steel, but claiming that all Canadian products, maple syrup, lumber, electricity, oil, everything, represent national security threats, that's legally absurd. It would be struck down by courts immediately. Third, political reality constrains even Trump. When he threatened to impose 10% additional tariffs on Canada last fall after Ontario ran that Reagan anti-tariff ad, he backed down. He made the threat, got the attention he wanted, then quietly never implemented it. Why? Because his own advisors, his own party, and American business interests explain the catastrophic consequences. The same dynamic will play out here. Trump makes dramatic threats because threats generate headlines and make him feel powerful. But implementing those threats would destroy American industries, spike American prices, and create economic chaos that would dominate news cycles for months. His own team will walk this back. Fourth, and most importantly, Trump's threat. The entire reason Canada signed the China deal was to create alternatives to American market dependence. If Trump follows through on this threat, if he actually imposes 100% tariffs, he validates Canada's entire strategic pivot. He proves that relying exclusively on American markets is dangerous. He forces Canada to accelerate our diversification toward China, Europe, and Asia. Trump is threatening to do exactly what would most strengthen Canada's case for building alternatives to the American relationship. This is strategic incompetence masquerading as toughness. Let's talk about what this threat really tells us, because it's not about tariffs. It's about power, control, and the panic of an empire watching its grip weaken. Trump's threat reveals that the United States has lost the ability to control Canadian trade policy through normal diplomatic channels. Think about what that means. For decades, Washington could simply express displeasure with Canadian decisions, and we would adjust course. We didn't need threats. We didn't need tariffs. American preferences became Canadian policy through the soft power of economic dependence and diplomatic pressure. That's over. Canada signed a major trade deal with China despite American objections. We're welcoming Chinese electric vehicles despite American containment strategy. We're diversifying our export markets despite American desires for exclusive access. And Trump cannot stop it through normal means. So he resorts to threats, loud, dramatic, economically catastrophic threats. Because threats are what you use when you've lost actual leverage. When you have real power, you don't need to threaten. You simply act, and others comply. Threats signal desperation, not strength. The Governor Carney insult is particularly telling. By refusing to use Carney's proper title of Prime Minister, Trump is attempting to diminish Canadian sovereignty through language. If Carney is just a governor, then Canada is just a province. And provinces don't make independent trade deals with China. But here's the problem with that strategy. Calling someone a different title doesn't change reality. Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of a sovereign G7 nation. Canada is not the 51st state, no matter how many times Trump fantasizes about it. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it true. It just makes Trump look detached from reality. The claim that Canada would become a drop-off port for Chinese goods is equally revealing. Trump is admitting that if Chinese products are manufactured or assembled in Canada, they could potentially access American markets under USMCA. He's admitting that Canada has the capability to serve as a gateway that undermines American trade restrictions. He's admitting that Canada has power in this relationship, and is warning that China will eat Canada alive. That's paternalism masquerading as concern. It's the language of a parent scolding a child for making dangerous choices. But Canada is not America's child. We're a sovereign nation capable of assessing our own interests and making our own decisions. And frankly, given American political chaos, given American trade policy unpredictability, given American threats against allies, the idea that we should trust American judgment over our own is laughable. Now, here's the part that Trump doesn't understand. The part that makes this threat the best thing that could have happened for Canada is a strategic position. By threatening us so publicly, so dramatically, Trump just proved to every Canadian business, to every Canadian worker, that diversification away from American market dependence is not optional. It's essential. Before this threat, there was significant domestic opposition to the China deal. Ontario Premier Doug Ford attacked it as betrayal of auto workers. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre criticized it as risky. Many Canadians were genuinely uncertain whether pivoting toward China was wise, given security concerns and the importance of the American relationship. Trump just eliminated that uncertainty. He just proved, definitively, that the American relationship cannot be relied upon, that American presidents will praise your decisions one week and threaten economic destruction the next, that there is no stability, no predictability, no trust possible in trade relations with Trump's America. Every Canadian who was skeptical of the China deal is now reconsidering. Every business that was hesitant to diversify toward Asian markets is now making contingency plans. Every premier who was defending exclusive focus on the American relationship is now quietly supporting Carney's diversification strategy. Trump unified Canada behind strategic autonomy. He couldn't have done a better job of validating Carney's approach if he tried. Moreover, this threat gives Canada enormous leverage in any actual negotiation. When Trump's team inevitably walks back this threat, and they will, when they come to the table to actually discuss trade issues, Canada can point to this threat as evidence that the United States is not a reliable partner. We can demand concessions, demand guarantees, demand respect as the price of continuing the relationship. Trump's threat also sends a signal to every other middle power in the world. Europe is watching this. Japan is watching. South Korea, Australia, Mexico, they're all watching the United States threaten its closest ally with economic destruction for the crime of signing a trade deal. And they're all drawing the same conclusion. If this is how America treats Canada, how will they treat us? This accelerates global diversification away from American economic dominance. Countries that were hesitant to challenge Washington, that were nervous about asserting independence, just watched Canada do exactly that and survive. Trump's threat becomes a recruiting tool for the very multipolar world order he claims to oppose. So what is the correct Canadian response to this threat? How should Carney and his government handle this? First, don't panic. Don't rush to appease. Don't offer concessions or walk back the China deal. That would signal weakness and invite further threats. When dealing with bullies, and let's be clear, this is textbook bullying behavior, showing fear only encourages more bullying. Canada should respond with calm, factual statements. Something like, Canada values our trade relationship with the United States, which benefits millions of workers and businesses on both sides of the border. We remain committed to USMCA and to fair, rules-based trade. Canada, like the United States, engages in trade relationships with partners around the world, including China. These relationships are complementary, not contradictory. We look forward to continued dialogue with Washington on our mutual interests. That's diplomatic, professional, and completely non-defensive. It doesn't concede anything. It doesn't apologize. It simply restates facts and leaves the door open for reasonable discussion. Second, accelerate diversification. Use Trump's threat as justification to deepen relationships with China, Europe, and other partners. Sign more agreements, attract more investment, build more infrastructure for non-American trade. Make it clear that American threats will not change Canadian policy. They will accelerate Canadian independence. Third, build coalitions. Reach out to Mexico, which faces similar American pressure. Coordinate with European allies who are also dealing with Trump's erratic trade policy. Create a united front of middle powers who refuse to accept economic coercion as normal international relations. Fourth, prepare contingencies. Work with Canadian businesses to develop plans for potential American tariffs. Identify alternative markets for critical exports. Ensure Canadian supply chains can adapt if American access is restricted. This is not because we expect Trump to follow through. He almost certainly won't, but because being prepared removes his leverage. Fifth, communicate directly with the American people and American businesses, most Americans have no idea how integrated the Canada-US economy is. They don't know that Canadian energy keeps their lights on, that Canadian steel builds their factories, that Canadian automotive parts are in their vehicles. If Trump actually implements these tariffs, Americans will suffer. Canadian government and business should make sure Americans understand that their own government is about to make their lives significantly more expensive and difficult. Friends, we are watching something extraordinary unfold in real time. We're watching the erosion of American hegemony, not through military defeat or economic collapse, but through the accumulated consequences of treating allies as subordinates, of issuing threats instead of building partnerships, of assuming compliance is permanent. Trump's threat this morning is not about tariffs or trade deals. It's about an American president who cannot accept that a neighboring country would make independent decisions that don't prioritize American preferences. It's about a worldview where American power should be absolute and American approval should be required for any significant policy choice by smaller nations. But that world is ending. Not because countries want to oppose America, but because American behavior is making partnership impossible. When your largest trading partner praises your decision one week and threatens economic destruction the next, when diplomatic norms are abandoned for social media insults, when treaties are treated as suggestions and threats are treated as diplomacy, you have no choice but to seek alternatives. Canada is not abandoning the United States. We're not choosing China over America. We're not betraying an alliance. We're simply recognizing reality. Exclusive dependence on an unreliable partner is dangerous. Diversification is survival. Having alternatives is not hostile, it's prudent. And Trump's threat this morning just proved beyond any doubt that Canada's strategic pivot toward diversification, toward China engagement, toward building alternatives was not just wise, it was essential. 7 days ago, Trump endorsed our China deal. Today, he threatens us for it. That contradiction, that whiplash, that chaos, that's why Canada needs alternatives. That's why we cannot afford to depend exclusively on American goodwill. That's why Carney was right. I want to hear from you. Do you think Canada should stand firm against Trump's threat, or should we seek to appease and preserve the American relationship at any cost? Are you more confident in Carney's strategy now that Trump has revealed his unreliability so dramatically? How do you think Canada should respond to this economic bullying? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this moment will define Canadian sovereignty for a generation. And if you found this analysis valuable, if you appreciate the calm, strategic thinking we bring when others panic, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're covering Canada, its assertion of independence, and Trump's desperate attempts to maintain control every single day, and your support helps us continue this critical work. Friends, thank you for being here today. Trump's 100% tariff threat isn't strength, it's panic, it isn't power, it's desperation. And ironically, it's the strongest possible proof that everything Canada did in Beijing was strategically correct. The bully is threatened. The threats are hollow, and Canada is winning by refusing to be bullied. Thank you.